Hi, everyone, and welcome to Around the Campfire. I'm Jamie Somley, Marketing Director at Northwoods, and your Around the Campfire host. I am so thrilled to have three of our exceptional digital marketing minds with me today to discuss what marketers need to know about data visualization. Welcome to Alex Boston, Digital Strategist, Kozlowski, Digital Marketing Practice Director, and Fred Pike, Managing Partner and our very own Google Analytics guru. So thank you all for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Before we dive into our topic, as who have been watching our episodes know that we always begin each one with a bit of personal trivia about our guests. So today we're going to talk about something completely different than we have in previous episodes, and that is pets. We are huge fans of all animals here at Northwoods, but we especially love dogs. We have several that come to the office regularly. And I know all three of you have a dog and are dog lovers. So tell their names and breeds and anything unique you'd like to share about them. And Fred, you only have less than a minute. We'll cap you.
Actually, can I bring her on camera?
If you have her there,
I do, yeah. Hold
sure.
on.
Yes.
So this is Shusha. She's a Pekingese, 11 years old, the love of my life, and she's, I mean, honestly, the bestest puppy in the world.
Aw, hi, Shusha. She is such a sweetie. Aw. All right, Ed, how about you?
I have a chocolate lab mix, but she's very small for like a chocolate lab. She's around 40 pounds. She's actually sleeping next to me right now. And I think her unique thing, I don't know if it's unique, but she definitely likes me more than my wife. So I enjoy that.
I'm sure your wife enjoys that
Yeah.
too. All right, Alex, we know you have a newer dog that you've recently adopted.
Yeah, a little guy. He's a Bichon Frise poodle mix. His name is Biscuit. He's been to the office a few times, so I think y'all have a chance to meet him, or most of you anyway. He's a very, very odd dog. He's just kind of had, like he said, kind of a rough go of it. He came from a puppy mill.
Ooh.
So he was taken in a puppy mill raid, and we found him, and he's done a great job rehabilitating and becoming a dog that can kind of be around other dogs and be okay. Unlike Ed, he is not my dog at all. He is my wife's dog, and he made that very clear from the start that she was going to be the one for him. But he and I, we get along.
That's awesome.
Very cool. And Jamie,
Very
you have
cool.
you have animals too.
I do. I have two dogs. I have a pitty mix who's about 90 pounds named Luca. He's 4. And then I have a teeny tiny little like 7-pound Chihuahua, long-haired Chihuahua.
Mhm.
So the difference between the two is kind of funny. And my long-haired Chihuahua is 15. So it's like having an old lady in the house and then this young kind of energetic dog. So the Chihuahua is not a fan of the other dog. She likes to take it easy. So awesome. Well, we could dedicate an entire episode to just
We
talking
should.
about our dogs, and we should, yeah, at some point. But I guess we should probably talk about data visualization. So I will ask this of all of you guys and jump in whenever you'd like. But if you could talk a little bit about why data visualization is so important for marketers, and maybe also a little bit about the difference between what a dashboard is in the marketing world and what data visualization is in the marketing world as well. So any of you feel free to just kind of dive in.
Yeah, I think we all have a lot to say on that particular question, just how important this subject is and how much of a role it plays for anybody. I think in general, just to touch on the dashboard differences, that it's all data visualization in some form, like whether it's a dashboard or an analytics interface or something that you're trying to, work into a presentation and do some actual storytelling with. All of that is a part of visualization, and all of that is important, I think, and you can have people who specialize in each one. But I think the main point of why it's so important is whatever setting you're in, whether you're internal or with an agency, you need to be able to prove that what you're doing and what you're pursuing makes sense, and that it's going to that it's the right strategic direction for you guys to pursue and where you should put your dollars and resources. So I think making that case clear is where visualization comes in, and dashboards help you get that point across and get the data surfaced as immediately as possible.
Agreed. And I think one of the things you can do with dashboards, it allows the data to speak, is as you learn with us, we work with clients. You can learn the clients in certain ways of visualizing things might work well for client A, but not as well for client B. And those tools allow us to kind of break up and change what we're doing. Now, generally, we have best ideas of what we think should be done, and we try to put those into our dashboard so you can visualize it. But some people prefer tables versus a graph, and sometimes vice versa. And being able to speak to different people in different ways with something that's visual, I think goes a long ways.
Yeah, and Alex said a key word, which is telling the or key words, telling the story, storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what the data visualization tools let you do. And part of the art of a great dashboard, of a great data viz practitioner, is stripping away all the extraneous stuff and just focusing on what's the most important metric or way to present that or whatever. And that's way harder to do than it sounds. But we've all seen some graphs that are so confusing, and that's not the purpose. That is data visualization, but that's not the purpose. So really being able to tell the story as clearly and cleanly as possible is what we try to do.
Yeah, and no pie charts, right, Fred?
No pie charts, or very limited pie charts, right?
We've all learned that from you now. Every time I'm like, oh, that could be a pie chart. Nope. Nope, don't use that. So what are some of the data visualization tools? And Ed, I'll ask this to you first. What are some of those tools that you recommend that marketers invest in that can really help you kind of tell those stories?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different tools that you can choose from. If you're using a CRM, you probably have a tool within it. But generally, what we recommend is Looker Studio. And the reason we utilize Looker Studio is we can pull data from all different sources. So your website, your GA4, or GA4, which is your website data, Google Ads, your CRM data, your email data. We can pull it all into there and create kind of a 360 view of everything you're doing to kind of tell that story of what's happening based on, the strategic direction we went and kind of what we're implementing, and if the impact is there or not. We've used other tools. I know a lot of people have BI tools that they utilize. Oftentimes people do come back to Looker Studio just because it is so simple to get up. It's very easy once you learn it to kind of get a strong dashboard and pull data from different areas. That's why I like it. It's also easy to share with people. So like, Jamie, we have dashboards that you and I go back and forth on that I can send to you. And if someone was not within our company, we can also send it to them and share it with them very easily.
Yeah, I think we've all had some struggle at some point wrestling with a Power BI setup, and trying to get it to do what we need it to do. It's totally possible, and it can be a very robust tool, but it requires a lot of expertise sometimes to get it to get exactly what you want out of it. Can be a very robust tool, but for most kind of shops that may not have a whole lot of bandwidth on the marketing side, but want to dip their toes into how do I visualize some of this data that I'm pulling in through Google, and other sources as well. I think Looker Studio is just a great flexible place to start.
And the other advantage of Looker Studio is that so many people use it. So you have tons of videos and blogs and support articles on it. And I mean, you have that around Power BI and Tableau to some extent as well, but nowhere near as much as with Looker Studio. So if you're really struggling with, how do I get this date range to work? There's probably a YouTube video on it.
Which is awesome. Yeah, it's very helpful to have all that support. So one thing I know that you guys have mentioned too is that there's a misperception among marketers that Excel could be used as a good data viz tool. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a tool that can be utilized at times, but pretty much anything you can do in Excel, I can generally do faster in Looker Studio and get it to the point I want it to be. The use of Excel is more using it for tables that maybe I upload to Looker Studio at times, or, sometimes I'm running that out of more of a Google Sheet versus in a true Excel file. Excel has its place. I've used it in the past. I just think Looker Studio is so much more friendly from a UX perspective when you're putting things together and creating those visualizations. And to Fred's point, I know Excel is going to have a lot of content online. You can go and find how to do things. Looker Studio has that just as much, if not more. And because it's easier to use, I just think it's a huge step up when you're looking at data visualization.
And it's so much easier to share a Looker Studio report than
Yeah.
Excel
Yeah.
Yes.
files too.
Yeah,
You can
that's a
also
really
add
good point.
additional context too. I mean, a
Yeah.
Looker Studio
Mm,
report can have some additional notes in it. It can have some overview points that otherwise it's a sea of numbers for Excel, which I think some people prefer to just dig
Mhm.
into the data. But I think most, especially folks who are not going to be very in the weeds on things, are going to want to see it pulled into some sort of visualization.
Yeah.
And I think another point is when you're connecting other data sources, you can do that oftentimes with Excel. But like if you have a tool like Supermetrics, we kind of have connectors that are built out to everything that we just kind of plug in very quickly and pull data from different sources into Looker without a ton of legwork. We basically just connect it, have our data, and then we just finish the mapping at the end. Versus Excel, there's a little more legwork when you're doing that.
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. And Fred, with you having such deep expertise in Google Analytics, what are some of the benefits that you see of using Google Looker Studio as a data visualization tool, particularly when it comes to, GA4 data?
So that's an excellent question. And it's kind of funny because originally so let's go back a few years. I was a real expert, real deep in universal analytics. I knew it very well. I knew where to go in the reports, where to get the stuff. And I'm, equally expert in GA4 as well. I didn't see the need for a dashboard or a Looker Studio report of any type for Northwoods, but we developed one anyway. We had some of our staff do, and then when I saw it, it's like, oh my God, it's so great to have it all in one place, all the most important
Mhm.
metrics. Yeah, I can
Yeah.
find them in analytics. I can go to all the reports. I know exactly where they are, but just to have them all in one place and see the interaction, literally, it's like, oh, this is what it's all about. And it took me a long time to get there, I gotta admit. But now that I got there, it's like, all right, this makes so much sense. Even if you know analytics really well, the interface is not the friendliest one. And just pulling the important information out into a dashboard, into a Looker Studio report, and being able to play with it there just makes so much more sense, I think.
And I think to that point, Fred, especially because we work with a lot of clients, we can show them where things are in GA4 of how to get to something, but when they want to look at it, they don't
Yeah.
remember that because it's a little more complicated. So we can get there, but it's not as easy for someone who, goes into GA4 once a month or once every other month, where we can send them a Looker Studio report and they have 5 pages. They just go through those 5 pages and they get what they want. And if they don't have it, then we build something that they want so it's within the report.
Yeah, excellent point, Ed.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
attest to that, Ed, since I call you or
Yeah.
message you about once a month, like, how do I do this again? I forgot. Yeah, Google Looker Studio is so much easier for those of us who aren't deep in the weeds on some of the analytics tools for sure. Alex, question for you. I know, one of the things that you and Ed and Fred have all mentioned before is just how critical it is to choose the right metrics to focus on to kind of tell that story. How should marketers decide which metrics make the most sense and how to approach that strategically?
Yeah, so I think it seems pretty obvious when you say it, but I think a lot of people kind of miss that it should always just be informed by your strategy. And that any good web strategy that you have, any good digital strategy or content strategy should be able to answer at its most basic level 2 questions, which is just who are we trying to reach and what do we want them to do on our site? Because it should be an active engagement. That's the unique thing about the web is we can reach people on an interactive level. And so your metrics should be defined by the answers to those questions. Obviously, there's a lot more nuance beyond that. There's ways that you can define your strategy at a much more complicated level. But at the basic level, it should be informed by those questions and what you're trying to do, and how you're going to go about doing that. So broadly speaking, if your goal is visibility, then you'd want to select metrics that were about just reach and impressions and people seeing you and getting a sense for, your site and visiting and, engagement wouldn't necessarily be the priority. It would be more just people are seeing us and are aware of our brand or our content or just generally seeing us more in search or anywhere. Whereas if you have a solid conversion that you're trying to drive, which may be this, or what are we trying to get them to do component of your web strategy, then it kind of naturally informs what your metric should be. That's the act that we want to track.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to make sure that we're driving everything back to whatever interaction we're trying to drive with our content. And so I think it just has to come back to those basic tenets of strategy, and then you use it to build out from there as far as what makes most sense. But there's probably, with each kind of broad goal, whether it's visibility or actual engagement with content or a certain conversion you have, there's a family of metrics around that you can use, and there's really never just one that is going to be the end all be all. I've worked at some places where they've managed to get it down to like this is our metric, this is the only thing we track, but it's very conditional and very rare that that happens. So it's kind of using the whole family of data attached to what your broad goal is to then, kind of have a broader holistic overview of how people are interacting with your site and how effective what you're doing is.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you all recommend or have any advice for marketers in terms of creating different Google Looker Studio reports or dashboards for different internal audiences? For example, the marketing team itself versus executive level.
Yeah, certainly. So I think it really, when you create a dashboard, you need to know who's looking at it, because if you're giving an executive who, they have other responsibilities, they're not in the day-to-day of digital marketing, they just want to make sure it's working properly. That's where you really want that strong KPI report that they can look at, 3 to, let's say, 5 metrics that tell them, okay, things are in good order. And if you give them too many metrics, they'll get overwhelmed because they don't know everything. They don't need to, right? That's not their job. That's the, let's say, specialist job at your company, where they need to be able to understand the whole picture and look at your complete Google Ads, understand all the data of Google Ads, how it's working and what can be tweaked to kind of increase things. So if I'm giving something to someone who's more actionable in the day-to-day, that's going to be a much more robust report, so they understand, what they're doing or what I'm doing is working, what can be changed, and they see all the different metrics and levers we can pull and the impact it's having. So yeah, I think it really, really depends on who's looking at that report and what they want to get, the questions they're asking and need to answer. If it's, hey, is this successful? It can be pretty simple. And then if it's why this is successful and what are all the nuances to it, it gets more granular.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Something with the metrics
yeah.
too, if I can just jump in. So
Absolutely.
my friend Tim Wilson was on the Analytics Power Hour as a guest recently. He's one of the co-hosts, but he was on as a guest this time, and he was talking about metrics and the importance of predicting success beforehand. So an example that Alex mentioned, let's say we want people to fill out a form. And so our metric for success is 25% of all our visitors are going to fill out a form. Let's just say that. I mean, that's pretty high, but let's say at least we've defined that. But is that actually the important metric? Because they may fill out the form, but they're spam or they're bots or they're junk leads or whatever. So the actual success is, did they turn into a sale? Did they attend a webinar? Did they attend our event or whatever? And so really thinking about, as marketers, thinking about how do we define success? First, let's do that in advance. So not after the campaign is run, let's do it in advance. And then let's make sure that our data viz tools dashboard is reflecting that definition of success. So I thought that was his whole point about predicting success, I thought was so important. And I really like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because I do think sometimes, marketers get so busy that it's just another campaign. We got to run another campaign. We got to get it out the door. And you don't stop to think about, well, what is the actual key KPI that we're going after for this particular campaign? So I think that's really good advice. Alex, were you going to jump in?
I was just I think adding on to that, I think there's a balance that's really difficult to strike between wanting to invest and spend money and run experiments and get things running and trying to learn from them, and balancing that with some thought beforehand and some time taken on the back end to do some strategy work and actually engage with a thoughtful approach. And I think that's a tricky balance. You don't want to be sitting back and just strategizing and thinking all the time. You want to be, trying to experiment, but also you don't want to just throw money at stuff and resources and time to things that you haven't thought out properly. So I think it's generally, if they're going to skip one, I see most people skip the strategic side and kind of taking let's just throw something up, which is, it's a good spirit to have. Let's try it. Let's get the analytics up. Let's see what works and what doesn't. But generally, we can spend a little bit more time, I think, on the whole, as an industry, on thinking about these things first and kind of planning out and making sure we're being strategic.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good point because it's a good reminder too that oftentimes I think as marketers, we're so busy and we're on to the next thing, and we don't take the time to actually do a retro either to really dissect what worked and what didn't from the previous campaign. So, do you guys see data visualization helping with that too? Going back to understanding what worked and what didn't. And do you see clients using those dashboards to kind of help them dissect
For
success?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. And I also think broadly understanding what's going on in the industry around you too, it can be really valuable for that. And what's going on, especially for us, we are clients on our service side, so we're seeing a lot of different clients. We have our own sort of sample set of, like, for example, I work a lot with SEO here at Northwoods, so there was a recent Google update that caused a lot of volatility and a lot of shifting in rankings. Being able to kind of see all of that data, and kind of I got some time, kind of going to the original point, I got some time to investigate a little bit and kind of dig in and look at all of the data holistically and try and visualize for myself, not just for others, kind of where are the changes shifting and what can I take from some of these trends. And I think so it's helped me not just understand it myself, but also to just generally provide a message to our clients about here's the insight we have based on these visualizations and pulling this together. So I think it's valuable on a lot of different levels to just, and kind of interacts with that idea again of strategic patience and stuff. And let's sit and think for a moment to take that time to use visualization and the practice of turning this into a narrative to drive, like, I need to try and understand this a little bit more.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that you can use all of those reports to kind of bubble up the kind of industry trends and what you're seeing and how that can be applied to, other clients going forward. That's great. All of you can jump in on this one, but I'm curious if a marketer is kind of overwhelmed by data viz. I was like, boy, I don't know Google Looker Studio. I don't know any of these tools. How do I get started? What do you recommend they do to kind of dip their toe in the water, so to speak, and take that first step?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of approaches you can take. One is you could take some type of course. I know there's very good courses to learn Looker Studio. You could spend time going through YouTube and just there's information on there. That can be a little overwhelming because there's so much information. It's hard to narrow down exactly what you need. Another approach is you work with someone like us who is an expert on it and help you kind of get up and running, show you how it's done, and we can train you on them as well. That's something we've done in the past, and it just can kind of bring it all together for you. I know when I worked not on the agency side and I jumped into Looker Studio, it felt really, really overwhelming. I didn't have a lot of examples to work from, or at least, they provide templates online, but I found when I had actual working reports to work from, that put it together for me, and I could see how they were connected and what was all being done. And then I was able to quickly kind of pick that up and start building my own reports. So I think there's a couple of approaches you can take. I don't know if Alex or Fred have any other ideas.
So I agree with you on both those points. One is if you really want to get deep, there are some good courses, and there's one Looker Studio Masterclass from a guy called Siavash Kanani, who is just brilliant in this field. And all three of us have gone through, it's like a 50-week course or something. I mean, it's really intense, and it may not be 50 weeks, but it's a long course, and you meet weekly. So if you really want to get into it, you can do that. Or you can tap the expertise that all three of us have developed through that course, through working with clients. And there's nothing like, to Ed's point, there's nothing like working, if your first exposure to Looker Studio is your own data, that helps make it a lot clearer, and you can understand how we put it together, and then you can learn from that. So I would say Looker Studio is not something you want to just dive into without some type of resources to support you in that, and certainly we can do that, or you can go deep in one of those courses, for example, but that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah, I would say on a personal level, if you're interested in getting into it, aside from just the enterprise level, which I think both Fred and Ed made great points about how to get into that for your organization. On a personal level, if you want to, the best thing that I think you can do anyway, it's a little stressful at first, but is work on the agency side and then have to demonstrate your value on a monthly basis so that you get really used to thinking in terms of I need to be able to present something here that's transparent and valuable and is demonstrating clearly that this is, making a difference and moving the needle. And then you will kind of over time, just that thought process will sharpen your ability to kind of get into this and figure out, how do I display this as efficiently as possible? So I think just generally, internal marketing is great, and like it's a great way to sharpen your skills, but when there's got to be some sort of like accountability and stuff in order for that to really drive home that you need to demonstrate value, because that's really where data storytelling, for me anyway, comes alive, is when it's presenting this is why this is working, this is why this is not, and real actionable insight.
Yeah, that's a great point, Alex. Nothing like pressure to kind of, make you make you dive in and learn more. But it's true. It definitely hones your skill set for sure.
It does.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on about data viz that you guys would like to share or talk about?
One thing that certainly plays in data viz, and you guys will know where I'm going with this, but the whole accessibility aspect. So I'm partially red-green colorblind. And the number of charts that show, oh, this is good because it's green and this is bad because it's red. Sure, do that, but add some other differentiator also, like add a star when it's good and a negative sign or something when it's bad. There's so many good ways to show this is good, this is bad, besides red and green. So think about all the audience that you're working with. Make sure that, again, the metrics are really clearly laid out. You're stripping away extraneous elements. You're making it so that anybody, regardless of what disability they might have, can understand it. And again, there's real skill and science in looking at that. So that's one thing that I would push for. Please, no more red-green colorblind pie charts.
That's like the worst of all possible things.
Exactly. Gradations of green and red.
Yes, in a pie chart. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, no, that's an excellent point. Ed or Alex, anything else for you?
Yeah, I will add, when you build a report and you're going through it on a monthly basis or weekly or daily or whatever, make sure the metrics you're using are actionable. They may not be actionable every single time you look at it, but if you have something on your report and you're like, we haven't used this in forever, you can probably get rid of it. So it's kind of, you need to step back and ask yourself sometimes, is this useful information? Is there something else more useful? Because the more useful it becomes, the better the reporting. And if you can get rid of things that you don't really need to look at, that can just make it quicker for someone to go through. So just make sure what you have is actionable information.
Yeah, kind of on both Fred and Ed's point there. I think there's a concept in print, or it used to be in print journalism, which was the ink to information ratio. Where it's just maximizing the amount of the points in your report, and that's visual information too. So going back to color choices and things like that, don't make it too noisy and confusing.
Yeah.
And, don't necessarily include grid lines and everything. Try and clean it up so that you can just see the actual trend that you're trying to highlight. Making as many visual elements as possible useful to telling your story and to highlighting the data you're trying to highlight, when removing, like Ed said, metrics that are not contributing to that or not something you guys use regularly. I think just being really ruthless with what you cut and only using what you can use, I think that's a really valuable point too.
Yeah, excellent advice. It sounds like it's all very much an art and a science mixed together. Like everything with marketing, it's an art and a science. Awesome. Well, Fred, Alex, thank you all so much for joining me today and sharing your wisdom and insights around data visualization. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. If you've joined us for the first time or you want to catch prior Around the Campfire episodes, visit our podcast playlist on YouTube or visit our website at nwsdigital.com/Around the Campfire. So thank you again for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you around the campfire again very soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Jamie.